and welcome to this episode of How to Start, Grow and Monetize Your Podcast with me, James Burr, and him, the podpreneur, Alex Chisnell. Today on the pod, we're talking about podcast growth or monetization. Which comes first? We don't know. We will find out during this show. By the way, if you want more information about how to monetize a podcast, how to start a podcast, and how to really make branded content that actually adds value to the bottom line of your business, makes you the expert authority in your space, then please feel free to check out yourpodcastcourse.com. Yourpodcastcourse.com is the place where you can get 55 on-demand videos on how to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. It's literally the strategies and the tactics that we've used nearly 400 times. We've launched shows for actors, athletes, celebrities, influencers, globally successful podcasts that have done great things for our clients. And all of that process is in that training course. 55 on-demand videos, trainings, guides, cheat sheets, blueprints, downloads, PDFs, all that kind of good stuff. You will literally go from a standing start to being able to launch your successful podcast in a matter of weeks if you wanted to.
Fully guaranteed for 7 days.
That's
Try
right.
it and never ask for your money back again.
Exactly. You can have your money back, but you won't want it back because you'll be so glad that you did. Go and check out yourpodcastcourse.com and you can see a couple of testimonials from people just like you who've launched successful podcasts recently, utilising the training. Right, let's crack on. Podcast growth versus monetization, which comes first? It's a little bit like chicken or an egg because they are not actually mutually exclusive. You don't need to have massive numbers to monetize a podcast. You also don't need to monetize a podcast in order to fund the podcast itself to get massive numbers as well. We've talked about this on a couple
chicken
of previous...
or an egg?
I've had both.
Okay.
I've had both today, in fact. God, what a lovely breakfast I had. I'm living my best life down on the South Coast. Oh, yeah. I'm moving to Paul. We have had, we talked about this on previous episodes, but we've had podcast clients that we know of who've launched very successful monetization strategies with no downloads, like from the get-go.
From the get-go.
If you've got a brand already...
And we're both trying to do that with brand new podcasts in the same space as well, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Both in the football space.
And you can, if you've got a sort of expert authority, if you're known in your space, you can go and get podcast monetization strategies up and running. You can go and get sponsors, you can go and get adverts before you've even launched the thing. Because you could utilize the numbers that you've got across your LinkedIn, your Insta, your TikTok, your YouTube, for example. You could utilize all of that stuff already in advance. I know someone who makes a lot of money from their podcast and has never ever even divulged what the listener numbers are.
Yeah, we're talking about
it's more important about who the listeners are than the listener numbers. And because it's a big podcast, or perceived as being a big podcast in a particular geography, I'm trying to be careful what I'm saying here, but because it's perceived as a big podcast in a particular geography, it's like one of the shows to go and do. So therefore they get really good guests, so therefore they get really good attention and awareness of the podcast, therefore sponsors want to be on it. But that is not lined up with the download numbers. It's just not.
And I wonder why, but we won't go into that now.
So the two are not mutually exclusive. This is the other thing, right? You can monetize your podcast because of, and again, I know somebody else who does this, that if people, they're a sort of a money broker in their particular industry, they're very, very well known. And again, if anyone comes to them and says, hey, could you put me in touch with XYZ? He says, look, I only really open my black book of contacts to my sponsors, so you can feel free to sponsor my podcast. I'll happily make that introduction. Great way to do it, because effectively he's getting then great businesses as sponsors of the podcast, because they're getting great value, not just from the podcast, because that is building awareness for them as well, but actually all the back-end value, which is the introduction that he's actually making. Yeah, so you don't need to have big numbers to make big money on your podcast. And again, equally, you don't need big money to be able to fund your podcast to get it to have big numbers, because you bootstrapped your podcast, and we were talking about this last night when you sort of sacked off doing it on a weekly basis. Were we getting 60,000 downloads a month or something?
Yeah.
Like if you had the
good
monetization
numbers.
strategies that you had now.
I know.
And that's long form content as well. That's not including the clips or the shorts or the reach. That's just audio.
Just audio.
So that's not video. So probably it's 100,000 downloads. Across video as well. Plus socials is probably even bigger than that. The impressions per month. We had a client, for example, who came to me and they said, I want to monetize my podcast. I want to sponsor. I went, okay, cool. How many downloads did you get? He said, I don't know. I said, well, how can you know what you think you're going to charge for it? Anyway, the podcast was doing about 8,000 downloads a month. So again, not tiny, not massive. Yeah, it's all right.
In there, average.
But they were doing really well on their shorts. So their shorts, I think we worked out across the 90-day period, and that's sort of what sponsors and media companies will generally look at the last sort of 90 days. They were getting like 2.5 million impressions for their content per 90 days.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, what do you want to make from this podcast? Because it's almost, a bit of a how long is a piece of string kind of vibe. And he said, well, I just want to cover the cost of doing it. And it's cost him about $2,500. So we went and got him a sponsor for $2,500. Bosh, done straight away. But he could have monetized that much earlier without having any data around the download numbers because of the reach he was getting in terms of other platforms. Just wanted to take a quick minute to say a big thank you for watching this podcast. If you are thinking about starting your own podcast to grow your brand or your business, then we would love to help you out. Yourpodcastcourse.com is a place where you can find 55 on-demand videos. There's trainings, there's blueprints, there's guides, there's cheat sheets, there's downloads. Everything that you need to utilize and to start your own powerful podcast is in there right now.
It's guaranteed for 7 days. So if you don't like it, we'll return your money and we're going to start you off with a fantastic offer.
Absolutely. Just because you are consuming this podcast for a limited time only, for the first 25 people only this is going to be, we're going to give you 50% off yourpodcastcourse.com. Click the link that's in the show notes. There's information there and it will be 50% off joining the course. As I say, we will walk you through how to start, how to grow, how to monetize your podcast. We'll talk to you about artwork, setup, names, ideal listener profiles, how to get the ideal guest, how you do the interviews, how you do the 14-day launch process, everything you need to utilize and to know to create a powerful podcast. We will tell you. We've done it 400 plus times. We have done some of the most successful podcast launches in Europe at this point in time, and the exact strategy and process that we charge tens of thousands of pounds to our agency clients for, you can get access to through yourpodcastcourse.com. 50% off for a limited time only. Click the link in the show notes now. Cheers.
And what I will say though, to caveat that, yes, you can monetize your podcast before you launch it. However, your podcast is going to be worth more the longer you grow the audience, the more you build a community. Yeah. It's going to have more perceived value. Whereas at the get-go, at the very start, you're selling something that doesn't actually exist anymore. So you're saying our audience could be X. So quite often what the compromise you make is it's saying we're offering you this at a cut price because we know in 12 months the audience will be based on, and we were talking about this, like, for example, the first 12 episodes, the reach of the combined guests is, for example, 25 million. So we know, based on our experience in the podcast industry, based on the niche of this podcast and how popular that category is, that the size of this podcast will probably be somewhere between X and Y in 12 months. Therefore, this podcast could be worth sponsoring $100,000 a month in 12 months. We're offering it you for $50,000 a month.
Yeah.
So, think about that. And yes, the temptation is to take the money now, but equally, if you are patient, we know someone like that, Dodge, who has a podcast, and he's played the waiting game with that.
Yeah, he done a post about it the other day, didn't he? 1,700 days since he launched the podcast.
And I believe from mutual friends of ours that he's now looking for sponsorship. Mutual friends of ours.
Yeah. That
he's looking for sponsorship for either that or potentially another show.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Build that audience, and then it's a delayed gratification thing, isn't it? But also, don't think with a lot of the people that we work with, especially if you are looking to build a podcast for expert authority or to be an industry sort of thought leader in your space, or you're a coach consultant, you're someone who makes your money in the expert economy, you will be making monetization happen via your content, because you will show expert opinions, you will show expert content, which will be put out onto social media, for example. You will get clients. Like I used to do all the time. I used to charge 1,500 quid a day to consult on branding projects. I used to get, probably an outreach every week or every fortnight, which again, if you look at it, if you landed one every week, 1,500 quid a week for a day's work.
Lovely job.
That's all right money, isn't it, for a lot of people? And that was only because of the podcast. Again, I wasn't selling anything. I was just giving expert opinions. And I landed some unbelievable consultancy gigs. I used to consult to the ex-CEO of Thomas Cook, who had just sold a business to Snapchat.
Nice.
It was mad. I was consulting to Tony Robbins' business partner at one point. It was mad. And that's all because of my podcast. They're like, I've heard your podcast about X, Y, Z. That makes a lot of sense. Can we have a call? And then all of those, those they were 4, 5, 6 grand a month clients.
Yeah.
All from a podcast. Now, again, you would look at the podcast and go, you didn't make the money through the podcast. No, but I made it as a result of the podcast. That trickle down revenue is so often for business to business and coach, consultant, expert people, that's where the bigger play is. And I think there's almost a bit of an ego thing. Well, I need better help, or I need AG1. You bloody don't. You're going to make your money on the back end rather than the front end.
So we were talking about it last night, weren't I? I was telling you the clients who've approached me for consulting. There's a couple there.
Unbelievable.
Crazy. And but they've all, again, come to me through my podcast. Can I go, my podcast generated 10 grand a month from this client? No, but yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I can go, no, it hasn't come through the podcast, but they've come to me because they found me through my podcast.
Absolutely.
So super interesting, guys. Super interesting.
It is indeed. Podcasting or podcast growth or monetization, it is not mutually exclusive. No. It is often both at the same time, and it doesn't have to come in one particular order.
No.
Is what we have discovered on this podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, if you want more information, if you're thinking about starting your own podcast, you can go to yourpodcastcourse.com and you can find out more information. 55 on-demand videos on how to exactly launch your podcast. This will take you from the A to Z of coming up with the chrysalis of an idea right through to successfully launching that podcast. The 14-day launch process, how to make clips, how to repurpose, how to get guests, how to interview guests. There's interview techniques and strategies as well, media training on there, loads of stuff. 7-day money back guarantee as well. If you are thinking about trying to extend the reach of your brand and your business, utilizing podcasting, this is the best place for you. Yourpodcastcourse.com. And we thank you for listening and consuming this content. If you have enjoyed it, let us know in the comments and we'll see you on the next pod. Ta-da!